And okay. So I get lots of questions about wearable health tech all the time. Which one's the best? Which one should we use? They all have upsides and downsides, and none of them are accurate. People are like, it's almost as good as a DEXA. DEXAs aren't very accurate either. If you actually look at the research behind DEXA, there's a 3 to 5% margin of error in both directions, which is a pretty big margin of error. What I usually, so we use Hume pods a lot. So I like the Hume pods because they're easy, they're functional, and they're as good as you're going to get. The thing that you want to do with a lot of the wearables is not necessarily track the individual function. So like, for instance, on the Hume pod or whatever, even a DEXA, it's like you're 13% body fat. Maybe you are, maybe you're 15, maybe you're 10, 11, 12. That's not nearly as important. What we can use them for, though, is the trending. So if you use them for 2 months and your body fat percentage is X, and then you see it over those 2 months, it's coming down, that's good, because you can usually trust the trends, because even if it's off 3 to 5% either direction, as long as the slope of the line is going in the right direction, you're losing the fat or the visceral fat or whatever. If the slope of the line of the muscle is going up, we're staying even. You can give a pretty good idea that you're where you're supposed to be. So a lot of those are fine. I think it's a great idea to track your stuff, but track it and then compare it to you. So for instance, there's been a lot of days where I wake up and I feel awesome. And I check I have a Sleep 8 system, which I didn't get to track. I got it to heat and cool the bed and vibrate to wake me up, which is amazing. Like I love my Sleep 8. But it tracks everything else as well. And so it'll kick over and it'll be like, hey, your deep sleep was X, your REM sleep was this, your heart rate variability, your all the stuff, right? And there's been days where I've woken up and felt amazing. And it's like, you didn't get good sleep last night. And I'm like, I beg to differ. I feel fantastic. And there's days I've woken up and been like, ugh. And it's like, you got amazing sleep. And I'm like, really? Did I? However, most of the time, I'll wake up and feel pretty good. And I'll be in a good mood. And it'll be like, you got this much REM and this much deep. And that, it's going to correspond to increased mood. I'm like, well, I do feel pretty good. So there's a lot of that is pretty beneficial. The nice thing is that I always like to look at, regardless of my score, how much REM and how much deep did I get and how many total hours did I get? That's important to me. And then I'll look at heart rate, variability. I'll look at, a couple of the other things in there. The nice thing is that what a lot of times will happen is that if you do this for a little while, say, a month or so, you kind of get a general, this is where I normally am. Then you start doing something different. You start working out harder. You start doing different peptides. You start doing different androgens, and you see your sleep is affected. That's a really great thing to do to kind of know, how do these things affect you? How does, growth hormone adjuncts or growth hormone or whatever, how does it affect you personally? Because again, one of the things we've got to remember, and this is the thing that I don't understand why it's so hard to push this out, but this is one of the things we got to remember the most. Everyone's body is a little different. The idea that we all have the same body and, food works exactly the same way, getting you fat and getting you, building you muscle and, making you sleep, everything as everybody else is absurd. So there's a lot of this. How does my body get affected by these things? And that's one of the great things we can do with wearables is give us more data. Take the data in, just do not take it as absolute 100% fact. Whatever your wearable tells you is, biblical gold. It's not necessarily that accurate. The general trends are going to be pretty solid. So watch those general trends, that type of thing. Some of the things that I would tell you are more important to watch, that I really like, that usually aren't in the wearable category, are pulse oximeters. Learning how to use a pulse ox is really important. So a pulse ox it gives you two numbers, percentage oxygen in the blood and heart rate. So what you want to look at is, how much oxygen's in my blood should be 98, 99, 100. And then the bottom number, the heart rate, how hard is my heart having to work to keep my oxygen that level? It should be 60 to 70. So that's kind of the optimal range, like 98 to 100% oxygen and 60 to 70 heart rate. So that's a really important tool to be able to use. The other thing is, how quickly does your body come back down to baseline? So if you went out and ran and got your heart rate up really, really high, how long does it take for it to come back down to that 60 beats a minute range? That's another big one that you need to start looking at, is, tracking that function. But a lot of these wearables are really, really, really beneficial to figuring out, am I in the right zone for cardio? Am I in the right zone for, for fat loss or that type of thing, or fat utilization? And there's a big, long discussion I have on that one, because I think a lot of people think that, if they trend higher in burning fat, in the morning, then they're good for the rest of the day and they can eat their carbs and stuff like that. And your body goes back and forth on utilization of fuel normally. Not everybody does, but the vast majority of people will go back and forth on fuel utilization. Again, that's an anti-calories conversation, but that's the other thing. So if you guys are looking for the best wearables, I love my sleep aid. Hume does a pretty decent job. Whoop does a pretty solid job. The Oura rings are okay. The iWatch is actually pretty solid. The thing I like about the Apple stuff is that they'll let you integrate anything you want to into your health group, your little health icon. You can track everything there. The Dexcom CGMs work really, really well in there. And that's another one. The CGMs, you're going to have problems with them if the battery's a little bit low, if they've been on you for a little while, if you're laying on them. There's a whole lot of people who are like, man, my glucose stuff just gets screwed up at night. And I'm like, do you sleep on you put it on your left arm, do you sleep on your left side? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Well, if you're laying on it, sometimes we have issues with it. They're like, oh, I didn't know that. And I'm like, yeah, next time if you sleep on your left, put it on your right and see what happens. And they come back and they're like, I moved it to the right side and my glucose issues at night are a lot better. Okay. Tracking glucose at night is an important thing to do, though. So just because you're not diabetic doesn't mean you shouldn't be tracking your glucose. It's a really great thing to do whenever you're trying a diet, especially if you're doing keto or you're doing something high protein, low carb. One of the things that you have to understand is that, again, everyone's body is a little bit different. Most people can produce plenty of sugar for their blood out of the proteins they eat. It's called gluconeogenesis. It's a very simple system. Like, I walk you all through it if it seems to care about the chemistry, but gluconeogenesis, your body makes its own sugar. However, again, everybody's body is the same. I've had lots of people who are like, man, I'm doing carnivore and I'm exhausted. You put a CGM on them and all of a sudden they're in the 60s, blood sugar wise. And you're like, well, you can't run carnivore or you can't run this style diet. You need to add more carbohydrates into your diet so that your blood sugar will even out. It's a great thing to do when people are, like I said, when you change your diet. It's a great way to track, are you staying where your body needs to be? Because your blood can only run on sugar. Your body usually makes enough sugar for it, but it can only run on sugar. The cool thing is that, again, more chemistry than you care about, but what happens is that the glucose comes into the cell, it goes through what's called cytoplasmic ATP production. So like as it comes in, it goes and splits into lactate and ATP. That's how the red blood cells eat, and that's how they use ATP, because they don't have mitochondria to produce ATP. But then the lactate circulates in the blood and goes through what's called the Cori system, or the Cori cycle, and it produces ATP from itself. So lactate also produces ATP. So the body is so cool. Like it's such a cool, efficient machine. But those are the things that are really, really, really great to do when we're trying to track everything. Is how am I sleeping? How's my heart rate? How's my oxygen levels? How quickly my body coming back down to steady state? Where's my glucose levels, throughout the day and throughout the night? And when I eat different things, like how does it respond? How does my body respond? These are fantastic things to look at. The other things, if you have big glucose spikes, how long does it take for the glucose spike to come back down? That is a slight indication of insulin functionality. So these things are great to use. The issue that I would warn you about is don't believe the daily numbers. Look at the trends. So if you look at something and you're like, oh, I haven't lost this or I haven't lost that, keep in mind and kind of check them. I love them I love the Hume pods for those body fat checks for people who are on GLP-1s and GLP-3s, because what's one of the things we worry about? Muscle loss. Well, if you're checking every day and the slope of your muscle line starts trending down, we know we have a problem. And so we got to increase our androgens, our testosterone, our growth hormone. We've got to increase our protein. We've got to increase our exercise. We got to do something, because as that line starts trending down, it's bad. So just keep that in mind. If you guys have any other questions, hit us up, questions@chalmerswellness.com, or drop in the comments. Thanks for your time. You guys have a fabulous day.